I took a lot of comfort from my study this week, and I'm glad you're here. I hope you take some comfort from the fruit of that today as well. There is a verse that really ministers to me. It's in the Corinthian letters, and the context is that Paul was being judged by the Corinthians. And in this little verse, he basically says, you know what? It's no big deal if you Corinthians judge me because I don't even judge myself. Now, please understand, I have judged myself. I mean, we all do that, right? Examine yourself. And I think I'm okay. But in that day, there is one who will judge the secrets of my heart. Now, that speaks to us in so many different ways. First of all, we're all going to get judged by other people, right? And what does Paul say? Don't worry about that. Their judgment doesn't count. And all God's people said, hey, baby. Yeah. The other thing, don't get all worked up about judging yourself. How many of us do that? Your judgment doesn't count. And all God's people said, some of you should have been saying a louder amen on that one. We're our own worst enemies. But it also said this. We don't know ourselves. That's what Paul said. We don't know our own hearts. How many of you know we're a mixed bag? We are really a mixed bag. Let me explain what I mean by that. I believe with all my heart that when I stand before God for reward day, did you notice my choice of words? I didn't call it judgment day, right? Why not? Our sins have already been judged. Your sins are not going to be issued at that throne. Isn't that cool? Now God's people should really say. All right. But in that day, it is reward day. And I really believe this with all my heart, that I'm going to show up there with this beaming look on my face for some of the things that I've done in the Spirit. And Father's going to go, here's your pile of ashes, son. But I thought that was in the Spirit. No, that was after the flesh. But wait, here's the reward for that. I'm like, but Lord, that was flesh. He goes, no, you was really walking in the Spirit that day. Do you see what I'm saying? I think we're just a mixed bag. And we can't figure it all out. And what I love especially about that verse is he has figured it all out, and it's all going to be okay. So let's close in prayer and go home. I say all that to you today because today I want to go to a psalm. And the reason I like this psalm so much is because it kind of talks about all of that. It talks about our flesh, and it talks about the faithfulness of God in the midst of our flesh and how he works it all out for good, and it's just kind of wonderful. And is that thing not working? Okay, we'll just do without it. We live in two dimensions at the same time. Isn't that right? I mean, we live in a physical dimension, and yet we live in a spiritual dimension. And I want you to understand this. I really do. Right now, I am standing before you physically. Is that not right? But equally true right now is I am in Christ. And Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father. And since I'm in him and he's in heaven, I'm in heaven. So right now, I've already been glorified and I'm enjoying eternity right now. I believe that with all my heart. Don't understand a lick of it, but I believe it. And so right now, we are all in heaven while we're on our way to heaven. Isn't that exciting? And the key is, my friends, we have to embrace both of those realities. What I'm finding is very often in the community of faith, we emphasize one of those realities to the neglect of the other. We'll be so consumed with the things of planet Earth that we miss the glory of the kingdom, which is going on right now. Or we'll so emphasize the glory of the kingdom that we fail to live down here on planet Earth and fail to live honestly and empathetically with our brothers and sisters in Christ. Let me give you an illustration. A couple of years ago, we were going through some Friedman reality. Avery was having a particular tough time, and Morgan's epilepsy had come on the scene. And we had a few other circumstances that just go with living in this fallen world. And I had a Christianette. You know, one of the things I enjoy about living in the South is I found out about this little phrase called bless your heart. You know, which really just means, oh, you dear little idiot, you know. And this little Christianette came to me and said, how you doing, Frank? And I said, well, I'm a little weary and frustrated. Well, that's not of God. And I said, no, but it's human, and last time I checked, that's what I am. Bless your heart. You see, this contrast of kingdoms is confusing to a lot of people. This flesh, while at the same time fullness of God. This glory inside with the gloom of living in a fallen world at the same time. The humanity and that the deity in the humanity, the earthly and yet the heavenly. And Keith, we start to go, how does it all work? How does it all mesh together? First of all, let me tell you this, you're never going to answer that question. So quit trying. You've got to understand Isaiah. My ways, what? Are not your ways. I think that should be the very first truth that every Christian learns, or they're going to be in for a real frustrating journey. It just doesn't work the way we think it should work. Got to start there. So we can't figure it out, Dick. But we can look back and connect the dots and see God working. That's what Psalm 34 is. And so I'd like you to turn there. Psalm 34. Tell you what, let's just go ahead and kill it. I'm going to not bother. Thank you. Psalm 34. And one of the things that we've said here over the years is never read the Bible casually. Read it intently. And I think that includes the ascription that's at the top. Notice that it's a Psalm of David. Now watch this language. When he, who? He, who's he? David himself changed his behavior before King Abimelech, who drove him away, and he departed. You know what I see there? I see a lot of human. I don't see any God in that description. Do you? A lot of human. You say, this is a very wonderful psalm. But when we understand the context of the psalm, it becomes even more wonderful. What's the context of the psalm? Well, we're not going to turn there, but it's 1 Samuel 21, and I'll walk you through it. In 1 Samuel 21, there's a king in Israel. His name is Saul. What's his name? Saul. Now, Saul, if you've ever read the Old Testament, was all about Saul. Right? And when Saul's Saulness was in question, he got very angry about that. If you don't get your identity out of God, you're going to get an identity out of something else, and something else isn't a good thing to get your identity. And when you get your identity out of something that can be called into question, you're going to get frustrated and angry. Right? Would you like me to repeat that? So Samuel has come along because Saul has not been very good with God, not very obedient, and Samuel says, Saul, you're not going to be king anymore. You're going to lose the kingdom. And then he goes and he anoints David to be the new king. Now David is still under King Saul because Saul is still king and he's going to honor the king, which is the right thing to do. But the problem is David is getting more popular than Saul. David has killed the bear and he's killed the lion and he's killed Goliath. And so the Israelites got this proverb going, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. And so Saul's Saulness is in trouble. And so he decides, I'm going to kill David. I'm going to kill David. Now think about that. Instantly, what does David do? He hits his knees and he looks up and he says, oh Lord, I'm in a desperate situation. What should I do? Guess what? Survey said, that's not what he did. You know what he did? He fled for his life. Immediately. Got out of Dodge. And I would suggest to you, with no thought of God at all. Well, you say, Frank, you're judging the man. No, I'm reading the scriptures. Because you know where he went? David, he fled Saul and went to the Philistines. Tell me about the Philistines. They're the arch enemies of David. And you know what the man did? He went to the Philistines with Goliath's sword. How many of you know that's going to tick them off? May I suggest to you that men who live in fear do really foolish things? Fear. I looked up the definition. It's called dread. The feeling that danger is near. I found this definition. I think it's the best I've ever heard. The painful, overwhelming, controlling feeling that comes over a person when they're threatened. Did you hear that? The painful, overwhelming, controlling feeling that comes over a person when they feel they are threatened. Fear, I think, may be the most overwhelming emotion known to man. In fact, maybe we can change it to overwhelming to overruling. Say, why overruling? Because fear will negate that which you know, affirm, and confirm to be true, and you'll live contrary to what you know because of your fear. See, David knows the Philistines are arch enemies. But what does he do when he's in fear of Saul? He goes to the Philistines. David knows the smart thing is not to bring Goliath's sword because you killed their hero, right? But fear will lead you to do something that you normally wouldn't do. I mean, David had been on Philistia's most wanted list. So he shows up there with Goliath's sword. They arrest him. And they bring him before the king. Now, what happens when you're the arch enemy of the Philistines? You get arrested and you get brought before the king. You're about to lose your head. So David hit his knees, looked up and said, "Oh Lord, please deliver me out of this circumstance." Have you read 1 Samuel 21? That's not what he did. He decided, bringing all of his human resources into play, to deliver himself from that which is causing him fear, and he pretended to be mad. He frothed and spit at the mouth. He laid down on the ground and rolled around, doing everything he could to try to deliver himself. And you know what's crazy? It worked. You read the passage and you know what the king says? "Am I so short of madmen that you bring this madman before me?" Apparently, there are a lot of crazy people in the world. The comedian Gallagher said 1 out of 3. You know what that means? Look to the left, look to the right if you don't see it. And so the king felt pity and said, "Let him go." So now, certainly David hits his knees and looks up and says, "Where should I go? What should I?" No, he doesn't do that. He runs like a scared rabbit into the desert and hides in a cave. This is the man after God's own heart. But look what's happened to him. He's been promised to be king of Israel. But instead, his life has been threatened. He's felt tremendous fear. He's felt alone and frustrated, disillusioned, discouraged, and destitute. He heads off, manipulates his circumstances, tries to control his circumstances, and ends up in a cave in a desert, scared out of his wits. Now let's think about that today. At this moment, right now, he could have very easily be teamed up with the accuser of the brethren. You know who I'm talking about? The slanderer, the deceiver, the enemy, Satan. And he could have beat the hell into himself. He could have said, "Oh, David, how could you be so stupid, son? How foolish can you be? You didn't even think of God. You were so busy trying to deliver yourself, you didn't even take time to pray. You just kicked it into fourth gear and did everything you could to deliver yourself. I mean, David could have done that, couldn't he? I mean, isn't that what we do? I mean, have any of you ever done that to yourself? And some of you lie and need to be prayed for. You know what's crazy in this psalm? David doesn't do that. Instead, you know what David says? I love this. I trusted in the Lord and he delivered me. I mean, what Bible are you reading, David? There's an old Puritan that I read once, and he said, I, being in the way, the Lord led me. I want that on my tombstone. I, being in the way, the Lord led me. I wonder, even though it hadn't been written yet, if David didn't have on his tombstone, 2 Timothy 2, even when we are faithless, yet he remains faithful. He cannot deny himself. He who began the good work, he'll perfect it in you, in spite of you. See what I'm talking about in this psalm? We're dealing with a God who delivers his people, and we're dealing with very messy, fragile people. And what I'm trying to tell you here this morning is that faith is very messy business. When I look at Psalm 34, I see a very human David. Look at those first few verses. I'm going to bless the Lord at all times. My praise will continually be in his mouth. Oh, really, David? That's what you were doing before the king? My soul's going to boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear of it and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. Let's exalt his name together. Really, David? And then the one that blows my mind is verse 4. Look what he says. I sought the Lord. As I meditated on this all this week, I just see a very human David. I don't start in Psalm 34:1. I start in 1 Samuel 21. The circumstances for how he ended up in that cave. And now when I pick up Psalm 34 and see him in the cave, I see a David who's smiling. Maybe even a David who's laughing. Reflecting back on all of his attempts to deliver himself, remembering how fearful he was, and rejoicing in this glorious truth that God is going to be God to me in spite of me. God is going to be God to me in spite of me. And through the many dangers and toils and snares that I've already come, it's grace. Just grace that's brought me safe thus far, and it's grace that will lead me home, and this grace is not a doctrine but a person. And I'm in relationship with this person, and he loves me with a covenant love. It's an unconditional love. But no matter how many times I mess up and I'm faithless, he's going to be faithful. And for that, what does he say? Man, I'll praise the Lord. Yes, I will. Praise literally means, you might want to circle it, to bend the knee. Now that could be bowing down in worship, Jesse. But it's the context that's the key. We find the word Lord, which means sovereign master, 16 times in 22 verses. So I don't think this is talking about bowing down in worship so much as it is bowing down in obedience. Recognizing the sovereignty of his God. And looking back and connecting the dots, if you will, he now comes to a resolution that from this day forward, at least that's my promise, In whatever frightening and menacing and fully human circumstances I find myself in, I'm going to choose with an act of my will to recognize God in the midst of those circumstances, that I am not alone, but He is with me and working in my circumstances, even when I don't see His hand or feel His hand working in my life, because I thought I was delivering myself, but He was actually the one delivering me. And He delivered me in spite of me. You know, you don't read in those first 4 verses David saying that I was so clever. He says instead, language, look at it, bless, praise, boast, magnify, exalt somebody other than me. Now the key is verse 4, and that's where I want you to home in on. I sought the Lord. That means I trusted the Lord. Man, I read 1 Samuel. I would want to look at David and say, oh, really? You did? Because I swear I saw you just run. And I swear I saw you act crazy. And then I swear I saw you run again. And when I look at 1 Samuel 21, there's not one verbal expression of faith. I see 99.99% David trying to deliver himself from his circumstances. But he says, I sought the Lord. And so you know what that leaves me with, Jerry? That this man after God's own heart, somewhere in his heart, cried out with such a small faith, Don, that it couldn't even find its way to his lips. And God heard that 0.01%. I don't know about you, but that comforts the crap out of me. Have you ever been in a state of life where you have faith, but it's so small it can't even get out your lips? And I love that because we have a God who says, I hear that cry. It is not great faith that moves the hand of God, my friends. There's no need for flowery promises, valiant bravado, devoted bending of the knee. All it takes is a glance. Just a glance. Linda, do you remember back in the Old Testament when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness and they were getting bit by snakes and dying? And they go to Moses, and Moses cries out to God, and God answers Moses, and he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to build a little brass snake. And I want you to put the little brass snake on a pole. And then I want you to lift the pole so that everybody in the camp can see the little brass snake. Now, anytime, watch this language, anytime that somebody gets bit by that snake, have them instantly turn and start crawling on their knees, crying out and praying till they get to that snake. Is that what it says? No. It says, all I want you to have them do is look. In fact, may I suggest to you, it's not even a look, it's a glance. You see, we're not dealing here with a distant deity. We're dealing with a God who reveals himself as a father, which means that if he's your father, you're his kid. And so let me put it in a phrase that I hope you will carry with you. We are not servants trying to move the hand of God. We are kids appealing to the heart of God. Did you hear that? We are not servants trying to move the hand of God. We're just little kids trying to appeal to the heart of God. And let me tell you, parent, when your little kid turns and looks at you in their moment of fear, in their moment of unrest, in their moment of sorrow, in their moment of need, do you not drop what you're doing and run to that fearful glance of that little kid? What makes you think your Heavenly Father would do any different? See, this psalm is a great psalm by itself. But when you put it in the context in which it was written, does it not magnify the heart of our God and the ease of which he brings us to a relationship with him? It's just a glance. That's all that's required. And instantly what's going to happen? Verse 7. He's going to camp around you. Oh, isn't that nice? It's better than nice. We've got to realize what he's talking about. And what he's talking about is when you go to 2 Kings 6. And I know you all know the story. Elisha is proving to be a thorn in the side of the king of Aram. He keeps hearing from God all the plans that the king is doing in his battle and telling them to Israel ahead of time. That'll tick you off if you're a king trying to win battles. So he finds out that Elisha and his servant have gone to the little town of Dothan. And so during the night, the king of Aram brings his armies, his mighty armies, and he surrounds the entire village of Dothan. And in the morning, Elisha's servant wakes up, and he goes out to draw the morning water. And the sun has just come up, and the sun is hitting the shields and the swords. Terror. Now watch what he says. What shall we do? Again, don't you love it, Kyle? What's the first thought we have when terror comes our way? I've got to deliver myself. Now, Elisha's been around a while. He's had an opportunity to connect the dots of God's faithfulness. He says, oh, little servant, come here. Fear not. Those who are with us are greater than those. Now, the key in this section is the in-between verse. The between 16 and 17. When Elisha got to look at the servant's face when he said that. We are more than they. And the servant's, it's you and me, big boy. How can we be more than they? And then Elisha said, oh, son, Father, will you please open his eyes and let him see? And God opened the servant's eyes, and he saw the chariots of fire and the armies of God surrounding the armies of the king of Aram. And you ever remember the story? It's so funny. God decides to use his armies to blind the king of Aram and his army's eyes. Well, what does the servant? Shall we smite them now that they're blind? He says, no. And he led them home to their own country and then opened their eyes. And can you imagine the shock? They were once around and now they're home. And God is so gracious even to his enemies. Will he not be gracious to his kids even when they don't have very much faith? I just love this. You know, I'm not a great faither. I walk a lot by sight. Now, fortunately, I married somebody who's a great faither, okay? She'll tell me sometimes, I'll come to her with something, baby, and she'll go, it's going to be okay. But how do we know that? Because, and she says, Lamb, was not God faithful here? Yes. Was not God faithful there? Yes. Was he not faithful in this? Yes. Was he not faithful in that? Yes. But that was yesterday. It warms my heart. I hope yours is warmed. To know that God doesn't require great faith to move on our behalf. That doesn't mean we shouldn't grow up in faith as we connect the dots. I love it that he delivered a man named David who showed no faith at all. I love it that he delivered a servant who had no faith at all. It's wonderful. And we need to know this because if you look at Psalm 34, look at verse 4, there's fears. Verse 7, there's enemies. Verse 7, there's troubles. Verses 17 and 19, there's afflictions. The psalmist is not saying you're not going to get into trouble on this planet. You're going to have those things. The key is that God will deliver you. Watch this. Either from those things, that's my first choice. Plan A, Lord. But you see, understand there's a plan B. He'll lead you and deliver you through them. I can live with that one too. The one I struggle with is the third one. God will deliver you with them. Ooh. That's the ones that don't ever go away. And he says, you're going to keep this one, but I'm going to be God to you in the midst of it so that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. David experienced all of these. That's why in verses 8 through 10 he says, taste and see. Michael, come on. Taste God. Now, did you hear the key word? Taste. I love the consistency of God. He doesn't say eat. He doesn't say you've got to have total commitment. He doesn't say you've got to have total surrender. He doesn't say you've got to have great faith. He just says, take a taste. All it's going to take when it comes to who it is you're tasting. And you'll find that I'm good. And you'll find how blessed is the man who finds my goodness. And verse 9, there'll be no lack. Oh, it may be tough. What you're going through may make you weak, but I'll be your strength. What you're going through may frustrate you, but I'll be your hope. Remember 2 Corinthians? I get perplexed, but we don't get distressed. We get knocked down, but we don't ever get knocked out. There'll always be supply. He wants us to know this. So look what he says in verse 10. He says, young lions, they lack sometimes. Young lions, they go hungry sometimes. See, young lions are strong and skilled and experienced hunters, but out of their own resources, they don't have enough. You know what that made me think of? It made me think of Peter. Remember Fred, Peter? That was a strong young lion. I'll never forsake you. And then he cowers before a young girl. See, he doesn't have the resources. But when you trust Christ, you'll never lack. Do you know how much Peter never lacked once he trusted Christ? That same man who was running for his life got up and preached to the city of Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. That same man, when it comes later, tradition tells us for himself to be crucified, says, no, Roman soldiers, crucify me upside down. I'm not worthy to be crucified the way my Lord was. And he experienced deliverance in that circumstance. Of course, that great theme verse of Isaiah 40, young men will grow weary. Yes, they will. Vigorous young men, that's the Hebrew word for athlete, they will grow weary. Yes, they will. But those who abide with God exchange their strength. That's why they mount up with wings like eagles and run and not grow weary. Because you're abiding in a life that is divine. A divine life in your own human life. So now David shifts his emphasis. From being verse 11, 1 through 11, the testifier, now he becomes the teacher. And what he's saying is this, to all who will hear me, I have experience with God. I've connected the dots. I've seen his faithfulness. Do you, verse 12, desire life like I do? Do you want to experience long and good days? Do you want to be excited about life? Do you want to see every day as an adventure? Do you want to have confidence no matter what you encounter? Then fear him. Worship him. Put him in his proper place in your life. There's that great verse in 1 Samuel 2:30 where God says, I will honor those who honor me. So he says, you honor me, I'll honor you. Verse 13. Keep your lips pure. Avoid evil and deceitful talking. Verse 14, keep your life pure. Avoid evil deeds and seek peace with men. When you do that, verse 16, you'll find yourself on the path that God is already on. When you walk in the path of obedience, that's the path where he has promised to be and be found. And if your path is rough, you brokenhearted, look at verse 18. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and he saves such as are of a contrite spirit. I love Ray Stedman. Listen to what he says. God is not impressed by our bravado. God is not impressed by our assertions that we have what it takes. And God is certainly not impressed by our attempts to face into the wind. Heaven does not help those who help themselves. Heaven helps the helpless. Heaven helps the man who's crushed in his spirit, who's brokenhearted, who does not trust himself. Heaven helps the one who is willing to expose his fear and be what he is, a weak, fragile vessel, desperately in need of the power of God in his life. That's the one that heaven helps. And we need that help because look what verse 19 says. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. Isn't that a comforting thought? You know what that verse functions as really? It's a promise. I love that. You know, there are so many lying preachers. I can't stomach watching a lot of those people on TV. Come to Jesus and all your problems will be solved. What a line. And you know what? There's so many people that want that to happen, they throw millions of dollars at those people. Jesus said, no, that's not the way it is. In the world, you're going to have tribulation. I mean, 1 John, the whole world lies under the power of the evil one. Philippians 1:29, one of my least favorite verses. To you it has been granted not only to believe in him, but to suffer for him. Isn't that exciting? Wish you hadn't granted that. But see, we have to understand something. When we put our faith in Christ, Joe, we left our citizenship of this planet. We became citizens of heaven. So that means we're still here, but we're here as foreign ambassadors. Have you read the headlines in the last 2-3 years? It's dangerous to be an ambassador. Ambassadors get killed. And so, yeah, we're going to have our Sauls. We're going to have our King Achish. We're going to have our deserts. We're going to have our Goliaths. Yes, we will. But that's only half the story. We will also have the Lord who delivers us from all of them. And then what David does is he throws in this little obscure thought. I promise to not allow any bones to be broken. And the New Testament writers took that and applied it to Jesus, who did not have a single bone broken. You remember when the Roman soldier came to crush his legs to hasten the death, he said, oh, he's already dead. And what is he doing here, Gail? He's saying, look, I'm keeping my promise for my son. I'll keep my promise for you too, because through him you became his brethren, and that means you're my son, you're my daughter, and I will see you through whatever it is you're going through. Verse 21, he says, the wicked are going to have their day. I like that. One writer put it this way, sin will be its own executioner. They're not always going to get away with it. I think of Haman. One of these days we got to teach that book of Esther. That's one of my favorite stories. You know, Haman hates Mordecai so much, he goes to the king and gets the king to agree he can build a gallows to hang Mordecai. Who ends up hanging on the gallows, baby? Yeah, old wicked Haman. I love that. And then he ends with this, the Lord redeems the souls of his servants. And the text of the Hebrew is really he keeps on redeeming, which means a neat thing. You know what that means, Susan? It means he's never going to stop hearing your cry. You don't have to worry about letting God down to the point where one day he's going to let you down. I take great comfort from this psalm. When things come into my life, I try to deliver myself all the time. Can you relate to that? And God says, look at that poor little, bless his heart. You know? And he works in my efforts to deliver myself, independent of him to deliver me. Sign me up. Father, thank you that you are such a God. That though we are faithless, you remain faithful. Though we don't even have enough faith to let it come out our lips, thank you that you know that we have faith in our heart. Even if it's 0.01%, and you respond to that 0.01% and deliver us. What a God. We praise you. Let all God's people say it. Amen.